Our next panel, The Republic of Death, Holding the Regime Accountable for Its Crimes, will discuss strategies and initiatives for those abroad to hold the Islamic Republic accountable for its crimes in the light of sacrifices made by Iranian activists and nation's transition from mourners to revolutionaries. Please join me in welcoming panelists Nazanin Boniadi, an Iranian actress and human rights activist with a focus on women in Iran, and Javaid Rehman, special rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Islamic Republic, who is joining us virtually. This panel will be moderated by Michael Lipin, a journalist with the Voice of America and the producer and host of VOA's weekly podcast on Iran, Flashpoint Iran, although he is not speaking on behalf of VOA or USA GM here today. Please join us in welcoming our speakers. Before the panel begins, please join us for a short video from Nufti's policy team unveiling Nufti's latest report, Hiding in the Shadows.
Hello everyone, I'm Navid Moheby, Nufti's policy director. Today, we are unveiling our latest report, Hiding in the Shadows, Exposing Human Rights Violations. Hello everyone, I'm Navid Moheby, Nufti's policy director. Today, we are unveiling our latest report, Hiding in the Shadows, Exposing Human Rights Violations. This nation uprising after Mahsa Amini, but it roots much deeper. This is the crescendo of revolutionary descent that started in December 2017. Mahsa's murder was a catalyst that reignited this flame of resistance, as her death became the rallying point for Iranians. Hello everyone, I'm Navid. Our latest report, Hiding in the Shadows, Exposing Human Rights Violators in the 2022 uprising in Iran. This nationwide uprising began after Mahsa Amini's murder, but its roots go much deeper. This is the crescendo of revolutionary descent that started in December 2017. Mahsa's murder was a catalyst that reignited this flame of resistance, as her death became the rallying point for Iranians from all walks of life, united under the banner of women, life, freedom. We have seen countless horrifying human rights violations during these protests. Killings, arrests, executions, and even the systematic blinding of protesters. After watching these abuses taking place and seeing the regime in Iran cut off the internet and attempt to brutalize the Iranian people without the world seeing, our team at Nufti decided to investigate these cases extensively. This report is a product of that investigation. Our report, which is the culmination of a month-long research effort, has two primary objectives. First, we aim to identify the officials responsible for these heinous crimes at various levels of governance within Iran. Second, we intend to offer this research to policymakers in the United States and around the world as a tool for imposing meaningful sanctions on regime officials. Indeed, just last week, we presented an advance copy to the State Department. We have meticulously documented information about 100 human rights violators across Iran's provinces, drawing mostly from open source research and, importantly, these violators' own public admissions. While this information is comprehensive, it is not just about the numbers. It's about real lives that have been altered by the criminal actions of those named in our report. This report is more than just an academic exercise. It's a call to action. We hope it serves as a resource for policymakers and as proof to the Iranian people that their struggle is not in vain, and their oppressors will be exposed. We invite you to read our report and join us in calling for justice and accountability. You can access the report digitally below. The Iranian American community has shown it has the power to make a difference when we unite behind a cause. It's imperative that we urge lawmakers to pressure the Biden administration to use this evidence to act and sanction Islamic Republic human rights violators. Together, we can make a difference.
Can you hear me? I would like to thank Nafti for inviting me to moderate this distinguished panel with Iranian-born British-American actress and activist Nazanin Boniadi, and with the UN Special Rapporteur for the situation of human rights in Iran, Javaid Rehman, who is joining us, as you can see on the video on the screen. And I would like to actually start by inviting Javaid to share with us any prepared remarks that he has.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible to you. Okay, thank you very much for this invitation. I begin by thanking the organizers of this Iran conference taking place in Washington, and for this generous invitation. I do apologize. I'm not able to attend in person as much as I would have loved to have done that. However, in the available time that I have, I shall highlight some of the key human rights concerns that are regarding the violations that are taking place in the Islamic Republic of Iran, with a specific focus on the absence of accountability and the prevailing culture of impunity within the Iranian constitutional, legislative, as well as administrative framework. Now, in my report to the United Nations Human Rights Council of last year, that is March 2022, after having examined the absence of accountability, I had informed the Council as follows. I had said to the Council that while accountability for serious human rights violations represents a core obligation of states in international law, this was not the case in Iran. I wrote in my report to the Human Rights Council, and I quote here, I said that institutional impunity and the absence of a system of accountability for violations of human rights permeates the political and legal system of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The absence of accountability derives from various deficiencies within the state structures, including negation of the principles of rule of law and separation of powers. And that you can find in my report to the Human Rights Council, and the specific quotation in paragraph 48 of that report. Now, I've had deep concerns as regard institutional impunity and the absence of accountability. And these concerns were sadly once again proven correct from events subsequent to the tragic death in custody of the morality police of the 22-year-old Gina Mahsa Amini. Ms. Amini, as you are aware, was from the Kurdish minority, and she died in Tehran on 16th of September last year, 3 days after her arrest for allegedly failing to comply with the country's strict rules on women's dress code by wearing what has been termed by the state as an improper hijab. So, while in the aftermath of her death, the entire country was gripped for several months with large-scale and nationwide protests under the banner of Women, Life, Freedom, Iranian people faced and continue to face worse forms of human rights violations. Ethnic, linguistic, and religious minorities have continued to suffer from systematic and systemic persecution, targeting, and harassment. Women and girls have been targeted with the most serious assault on their fundamental human rights and fundamental human dignity. Regrettably, the morality police, the cause of much detestation and aggravation, has lately been redeployed, with women and girls being confronted, detained, and harassed. These policies are intended to further violate women's rights and their dignity by attempts to enforce the hijab. The state authorities, instead of recognizing the legitimate demands of the protesters, including ending the practice of enforced hijab and ensuring accountability for those involved in the killing of Ms. Amini, characteristically reacted in the most repressive manner. Iranian police and security forces violently cracked down on protesters, revealing a widespread pattern of unlawful lethal use of force. It was also tragic to note that ethnic and religious minorities who have suffered decades of systematic and systemic discrimination and persecutions have been disproportionately impacted in the current wave of repression. There has been gross overrepresentation of ethnic and religious minorities in the killing of protesters that started since September of last year. If you look at the statistics, over half of the total number of persons killed since the start of the protests are Balochis and Kurds. In one of the reported incidents on 30th of September last year, also called the Black Friday, in the city of Zahedan in Sistan, Balochistan province, according to verified reports, Iranian security forces shot and killed at least 95 persons, including 9 children, with over 400 persons injured. A majority of the victims were shot in their heads, heart, neck, and torso, demonstrating a clear intention to kill or to seriously harm. The constitutionally non-recognized religious minorities, in particular the Baha'is, have also been subjected to increasing repression and persecution over the last 1 year. Since September of last year, September 2022, protests, we estimate that at least 537 persons, including 68 children and 48 women, have been killed by the Iranian security forces. As I noted earlier, there is continuing violence against women and girls. This has been absolutely shocking. This violence includes cases of deliberate killings as well as sexual and physical violence. I'm absolutely horrified, shocked, outraged that despite appeals by the international community, including by my own mandate, Iranian authorities have thus far executed at least 7 persons associated with protests after summary, arbitrary, and sham trials, which violated the right to fair trial and due process rights. These summary executions are the symbol of a state ready to use all means to instill fear and to quash protests. I'm very concerned that several other individuals continue to face charges that carry the death penalty. Iranian authorities have also tried to shut down all avenues of freedom of expression, disrupting internet and censoring social media platforms. I am deeply disturbed at the reports of threats, arrests, and imprisonment of journalists for their critical and independent reporting, including in the context of protests, and indeed through the subsequent suspected school poisoning that affected the health of thousands of schoolgirls. In addition, and that is one of the key points that I want, the state has weaponized the death penalty as an instrument of fear and repression. This was evident through the executions of well over 582 persons last year, which also included at least 3 persons sentenced to death as children. As of today, the reports that I have, they inform me that at least 534 persons have already been executed in this year alone. This is a great travesty of justice, great tragedy, and great loss. In the light of the evidence that has been made available to me, I had taken the view that very serious and grave human rights violations had taken place in the aftermath of the protests that began from September 2022. And I reported to the Human Rights Council earlier this year, and I quote here, I said that the scale and gravity of these violations point to the possible commission of international crimes, notably crimes against humanity of murder, imprisonment, and forced disappearances, torture, rape, and sexual violence and persecution. End of quotation. And you can find my report to the Human Rights Council, and this paragraph is paragraph 75F. So now, please allow me to make a few points about the issue of ending of impunity and ensuring accountability. Knowing the culture of impunity and the absence of any domestic avenues of accountability in Iran, I have strongly advocated the establishment of international investigative mechanisms. An important positive initiative in this regard has been the establishment of the International Fact-Finding Mission, which, as you would remember, or some of you would remember, was established by the Human Rights Council after its historic resolution adopted on the 24th of November 2022. The other possibility, which was also witnessed in the conviction of Hamid Nouri by a Swedish court in the July of 2022, is the use of universal jurisdiction to try individuals for having committed very serious crimes in international law, including crimes against humanity and other very serious human rights violations. And I will end by this strong assertion that as part of the international community, we must demand an end to the culture of impunity for the Iranian regime. We must demand justice and equality for the victims, as well as ensuring the promotion and protection of human rights, which the Iranian people so fully deserve. I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Javaid, for that very thorough rundown on all the work that you've been doing through your mandate. I'd like to turn now to Nazanin on my right here. What's going through your mind as you listen to the very detailed description that we just heard from Javaid about the many rights violations that he has been monitoring in Iran? What do you think of the work that he and his mandate have been doing? And also, what are the best ways, in your view, of trying to end the impunity that he talked about?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Nufti. And I have to take a moment to thank Mr. Rehman for his incredible work. He's a staunch and vocal advocate for the rights of the Iranian people, so we thank you, sir. We should be very happy that his mandate was renewed, because we need a voice at the UN. And frankly, we've had 44 years now of this culture of impunity reigning supreme inside the Islamic Republic of Iran. We've, of course, been accustomed to mass uprisings once every 10 years, or about that. 1999 student protests, the 2009 Green Movement, Bloody November protests of 2019, and I would also add the Gaza Revolution Street of 2017. We'll notice that the ebbs and the flows, the time between the ebbs and the flows of these protests are getting shorter and shorter. So since 2017, we've had mass uprisings once a year, with the exception of the pandemic sort of putting a pause in things until last year, when, of course, we saw another mass uprising. And of course, because of this culture of impunity and the lack of avenues to justice inside the country, it's incumbent upon us and the international community to ensure that there is accountability inside Iran and justice for the Iranian people. So the work of Mr. Rehman is extraordinarily important, and it's really important also that we have this sort of multinational, bipartisan, and unified Iranian diaspora approach to supporting the needs and the wants and the desires of the Iranian people as they risk everything for freedom. So that's really where I stand in support of Mr. Rehman's incredible work, and with the understanding that far more needs to be done and far more unity needs to be shown for this cause.
Well, in terms of what needs to be done, turning my next question to Javaid, the Nufti report that we heard about in the video preceding our conversation identifies 100 mid-level officials that Nafti argues should be hit with targeted sanctions. And we've seen the West in the past impose targeted sanctions against much higher level officials. What can you share about conversations you've had with member states of the UN, with civil society, about the issue of targeted sanctions? What kinds of targeted sanctions do you think would be effective in trying to stop the impunity?
Yeah, thank you for this question. It's an important question. Now, you see, I support sanctions. I support targeted sanctions for individuals where there is concrete evidence that they have committed very serious violations of human rights and violations of humanitarian law and international law in general. But the issue has been that these targeted sanctions are in fact quite disjointed, if I can say. Different countries have used different mechanisms, or they have targeted different people. So what is needed is a cohesive effort to have effective sanctions against individuals. The difficulty is that when you place sanctions against individuals, often they may prove purely academic, because they may not have any assets in the countries which have placed sanctions, or they may never travel to those countries. So to make these sanctions concrete, I think we have to address the real issues, have sanctions on those people who really have been at the helm of the affair. So I would include in those sanctions the very top people in the governance structure. And therefore, the international laws that we have, which prevent accountability and which allow continued impunity, should also be removed as regards people where there is substantial evidence that they have committed serious crimes in international law, for example, the crimes against humanity. So while targeted sanctions have a place, they must be effective, and they must be applied to those people whom there is substantial evidence that they have committed very serious crimes in international law. Thank you.
Well, one follow-up question, Javaid, is have you sensed any momentum in the international community for a more cohesive approach to targeted sanctions?
Thank you. Again, that's an important question. If you look at my recommendations, I've campaigned that these targeted sanctions, they must be effective. And currently, if you look at the various entities, for example, the United States or the UK or the European Union or states within the European Union, they have these sanctions against individuals. But I think there needs to be a cohesive effort to ensure that these sanctions are placed against individuals after established evidence that they have committed serious crimes against international law, crimes against humanity, torture, very serious violence. But then these individuals somehow have to be impacted by these sanctions. In many cases, as I say, the effect is not so strong, because these individuals, because they're individual sanctions, they are not affected because they do not have assets which can be frozen, or they don't have properties, they don't travel to these countries. So it may not prove to be that effective ultimately. And that's why we continue to see violations taking place, in some instances, very serious violations taking place by these individuals, because they remain undeterred by these sanctions.
Nazanin, what is your view of the utility of continuing to have the West identify individuals, designate them for sanctions? Do you have the sense that it's more symbolic, or do you think it could actually make a difference?
I think it's symbolic when we don't enforce sanctions. So sanctions only work when they're enforced. So, one example is oil revenues with Iran, which have increased by 15 billion since the initial year of implementation of the JCPOA. So as long as we, don't enforce these sanctions, they're not going to work. And it's really as simple as that. But I do think targeted sanctions and magnancy sanctions are very important. They've proven to be important historically. But that's why I mentioned a multinational approach, and I agree with Mr. Rehman. If there is no cohesive way of dealing and approaching with this on an international front, then we're doomed. Because, I've been meeting with international lawmakers. One country will tell me one thing, another country will tell me something else, and I'm thinking, are you not communicating with each other? Because I know that autocrats, we've seen this in recent history, in past weeks, they're very good at communicating and supporting each other. And yet we seem to consistently fail on that front. We don't have a way of being united in dealing with dictators and repression. So I think that's what's really needed.
Can you share anything, Nazanin, about the kinds of officials, governments you've met with and discussed this topic with?
Yes, the UK government, the US government, obviously, German officials, European officials. I'm about to go to Australia and meet with Australian lawmakers. It's really, the message that I'm trying to communicate to all of them is, please unite. Because at the end of the day, the Islamic Republic has stayed in power and been able to oppress the Iranian people because of its policy of divide and rule. And the only antidote to that is for us to unite and empower the Iranian people. It's really as simple as that. So that's what I'm trying to convey is all of our policies with regards to Iran or the Islamic Republic need to be that we unite and empower the people.
Javaid, another mechanism that you've described for dealing with impunity, actually in a report that you submitted to the UN General Assembly in August, at the very conclusion of that, you had some recommendations, and you also talked about this idea of universal jurisdiction, of having countries try to prosecute Iranian officials accused of rights violations when those officials happen to be in the territories of those countries. Can you share anything about recent examples of universal jurisdiction being applied, and how effective a tool do you think that can be?
Yes, thank you. Again, that's a great question. You see, where there is absence of accountability domestically, and that's what I said to you just a minute ago, then we have to look internationally. And the use of universal jurisdiction in this regard is a very important mechanism, because what the universal jurisdiction does is to allow another state or another jurisdiction to hold individuals accountable for the crimes that they have committed in another jurisdiction. So, for example, when individuals commit very serious crimes in international law, such as the crime of torture or crimes against humanity, if these individuals are apprehended elsewhere in another jurisdiction, the courts of that country can take account of the individuals, they can arrest those individuals, they can try those individuals, and ultimately convict them for very serious crimes in international law, or grave crimes such as torture or crimes against humanity. And that is what we saw. And I mentioned to you the Hamid Nouri case, that this is what happened in Sweden, that Mr. Nouri was apprehended, arrested, charged, and then convicted last year for war crimes and murder, for the very serious role that he played in the mass executions of 1988. So therefore, I think universal jurisdiction is an important aspect, a tool for holding serious violators of human rights accountable, even though in their own countries they enjoy impunity and immunity. But these are serious criminals. they must not escape justice, and therefore courts outside of their own countries must take cognizance of this important principle in international law, that is the universal jurisdiction. Thank you.
Javaid, when you think about the conversations you've had with UN member states, do you get a sense that there is an appetite beyond just Sweden to exercise universal jurisdiction? And how worried do you think Iranian officials are about this concept being applied to them if they travel overseas?
Yes, in my interaction with various governments, this issue has been raised. And in fact, as I mentioned to you, we have a case of Hamid Nouri now setting up a precedent. So there is that recognition, and universal jurisdiction is a well-established principle in international law. We've had instances in the past where individuals have been charged and convicted based on universal jurisdiction. And therefore, I encourage members of the United Nations to ensure justice. And that is one of the strongest tools in the armory of international law to ensure that criminals, individuals who have committed very serious recognized crimes in international law, do not escape justice. And therefore, I think that the international community is looking towards using universal jurisdiction to hold individuals accountable.
Nazanin, what have you heard in your conversations with governments about this idea of universal jurisdiction and having more cases like with Hamid Nouri? Do you think that's a prospect?
I think it's a prospect. I think we need to keep the pressure on the international community. Your voices really do matter in bringing about these changes. So please unite and amplify what Mr. Rehman and others are so relentlessly working on. I think it's very important that we champion this collectively on an international level. There are millions of people in the Iranian diaspora that should be championing this.
Javaid, I'd like to turn back to you and to see if you can give us an update on the next reporting that you will be doing on Iran as part of your mandate. If you could share with our audience what kind of reporting it's going to be, when it's going to be issued, and if you can give us any preview of what those reports might say.
Yes, thank you. So your audience might be interested that I am traveling to the United States at the end of next week. I'll be presenting to the General Assembly in the third week. I think it's the 24th of October. And I will be presenting to the General Assembly on issues of key concerns. A summary of what I have already detailed in my report, which is published and which you have referred to. Now, insofar as the next report is concerned, the next report would be submitted to the Human Rights Council. I'm currently working on it, and again, as in my previous work, I would be looking to engage with victims and with individuals who have concerns, with relevant stakeholders, with governments, with all forms of entities, to assess the very concerning and very worrying developments in Iran that are taking place. The human rights situation is dire. It is becoming much worse. There is a lot of repression. I mean, one of the big concerns that we have now is the bill currently before the lawmakers about enforced hijab and its potential repercussions, which I'm afraid is going to lead us to something which I have said on numerous occasions, which is going to result in a form of gender apartheid, you see. So there is a real concern about gender apartheid taking place in Iran, and I am going to highlight that in my next report to look at the various forms of gender apartheid that are practiced both in the criminal laws of Iran as well as in the civil law. I mean, this is a very disturbing situation that women are subjugated, harassed, ostracized, excluded, and targeted and victimized. They have no fundamental rights, even to the extent that they cannot express themselves. The enforced hijab law is going to become operational, and so what has the international community learned from last year? There has been nationwide demonstrations, but to what effect? What has the Iranian authorities done about it? So I'm going to highlight and expose the Iranian authorities on the worst crimes that they are committing in my next report. Thank you.
Speaking of the ongoing rights violations in Iran, I want to turn to Nazanin now. And the world's attention obviously has shifted somewhat in the last couple of days, perhaps away from those ongoing violations inside Iran to what's been happening with the Israel-Hamas war that is now, I think, in its 6th day. So what I wanted to ask you, you've been quite vocal on social media, on Instagram and X, about how you see Iran's role in this conflict and how you see that Iran's long-time provision of monetary and monetary support and weaponry to Hamas should be, in your view, another reason that the international community should shun the Islamic Republic. What can you share with our audience about what you're hearing from people inside Iran, how they feel about this conflict that just erupted and how it might ultimately affect them?
I mean, let's talk about indisputable facts. We see videos coming from sports arenas where sports fans very clearly articulated where they stand.
You're talking about a soccer match that just happened.
Yes. We can also point to the Islamic Republic officials' celebration of the gruesome terror attacks by Hamas on Israelis. We can also point to the fact that 70% of Hamas's funding has come from the Islamic Republic. So whether direct, actually, that they gloated, yesterday on state TV, the Islamic Republic gloated that they were party to or helped with this attack. So these are the indisputable facts. Also, it's, conveniently for the Islamic Republic has ruined the Saudi-Israeli normalization process. It has completely diverted attention away from domestic oppression of the Iranian people. So these are the undisputable facts, and the fact that Hamas is an Islamic Republic proxy is also indisputable, and is furthering the aims of the regime. So with that in mind, I want to keep the focus on the people of Iran, because my heart bleeds for the innocent civilians in the region who are dying because of the Islamic Republic's policies. So we have to point the finger towards the people who are responsible, and that is the Islamic Republic authorities. But for 44 years, we've only dealt with the symptoms of the problem vis-a-vis Iran: the nuclear issue, domestic oppression, regional aggression, terrorism, hostage-taking, which of course we're seeing Hamas also engage in. It's a Islamic Republic from the Islamic Republic playbook. What we haven't dealt with is the cause. The cause is the Islamic Republic theocratic regime. And so it makes it even more important that we condemn and hold this regime accountable while the people inside Iran continue to suffer. The people of the region are being slaughtered. Innocent civilians are dying because of the Islamic Republic's policies. And so when I think about what's happening inside Iran, I think about Armita Geravand, still in a coma after almost 2 weeks. There are also reports that she was actually dead on arrival, but that she's being kept alive by machines to avoid further protests. I hope that Armita stays alive and she recovers to be able to someday see a free and democratic Iran. I also want to point to the families who continue to bravely seek accountability for their loved ones, for the persecution and execution of their loved ones. the killing, murder of their loved ones. Mahmouni Moulairad, the mother of 9-year-old Kian Pirfalak, who's reportedly currently under house arrest. Mr. Karami, who sought justice for his son and is currently in prison being tortured reportedly. The countless people inside Iran, like Fatemeh Sepehri and Narges Mohammadi, and the list goes on and on, of people who deserve our attention. And again, I want to emphasize, the root cause is what we need to address here, and it is the Islamic Republic regime.
Well, Nazanin, you just... Nazanin, you just mentioned Narges Mohammadi, and her Nobel Peace Prize is another development that has been somewhat overshadowed by the war that has been unfolding between Israel and Hamas. The Iranian government acknowledged the award. They downplayed it. Narges Mohammadi herself, we know through her family, heard about the award and celebrated it in her own way with her fellow prisoners. What do you think is her fate as she remains imprisoned, and as we see the United States and others in the West call for her immediate release?
Well, as we saw in the case of Navid Afkari in 2020, despite international outrage, he was executed, showing the utter contempt of this regime for the rule of law. So what I can say is it helps to shine attention on these prisoners. It helps that Narges Mohammadi has been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. It helps for us to continue focusing on their cases. But please don't ever think that because we do, they will be saved. We need to continue to keep the pressure on them. What we do know for sure is that the regime continues to kill in the dark. So where we fail to shine a light on these cases, the chances of them being tortured and executed is much, much higher.
Well, if I can turn to Javaid, how worried are you about what Nazanin just described, having individuals, dissidents in Iran who are facing the threat of execution, having the regime basically having the Iranian government try to get rid of them, hoping that the rest of the world will not know what's going on?
Well, I mean, as I just mentioned in my presentation, the Iranian regime instills fear. I mean, they execute people to instill fear, and that is a tool that is so evident. I mean, just last year, as I mentioned, nearly 600 people were executed, including 3 children, and already we are witnessing a very large number of individuals who are going to be executed. That consists of a very significant, very tragic, disproportionate number of ethnic and linguistic minorities, the Kurdish people, the Balochis people, the Baloch who have suffered for decades. They are in the Balochistan is the most impoverished province of Iran, and yet you'd see such a disproportionate number of people who are executed. And the tragedy of it is that over half of the people executed who are executed relate to the drug offenders executions. So the whole objective, it seems, of the Iranian regime is to instill fear through oppression, through executions, through targeting, to create an atmosphere of fear, so that people are not able to express their free opinions and expression, to exercise the right to expression. So if you look at my most recent report on political participation, on public participation, there is that determined effort to repress people and to stop them from freely expressing themselves. Look at the position of women, look at the position of ethnic and religious minorities. They are excluded from the mainstream. They are excluded from public and political participation, precisely because those who are in power, they want to remain in power at the expense of everybody else. So I think it's very important that the international community recognizes the urgent need for democratic reform, for political participation, and for people to be freely able to express themselves and to able to express their rights to enjoy their most fundamental human rights as we see it in the international community. Thank you.
Well, Nazanin, we heard Javaid talk about the fear that the Iranian authorities are trying to instill in their people. What can you tell us about what you and other activists have been doing to try to help the people in Iran who are fighting for freedom to face this fear and to try to overcome it as they try to improve their situation?
Thanks for the question. I can speak for myself. I don't know what other people are up to, but I do know that more and more people have come forward and stepped up in the past year, and it's really refreshing to see our unity and our continued work on this front. So many people care about the people inside Iran now. And what I've been focused on is in 1979 in the Islamic Revolution, there was a network, the mosque network, for example, that Ayatollah Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic, used for his propaganda, to get the international community galvanized around his campaign, if you will. And what we've lacked, I think, in 44 years is a concerted network, effort and network internationally that would help galvanize and amplify the people of Iran on an international scale. So I've really been focused. I can't go into details, unfortunately, because it does put people at risk. But internationally, there needs to be a network, which I'm working on, of sort of bringing organizations and individuals into a position of reflecting the needs of their counterparts in Iran. And that's all I can really say currently. But it needs to be an international campaign and system in place to mirror what Khomeini had in '79, which was the mosque network. Similarly, I'm also working on something to hold companies like Bosch to account for dealing with the Islamic Republic and, in fact, supplying cameras to the Islamic Republic to be used in surveilling the Iranian people and women without compulsory hijab. That should be illegal. And no Western country, no company, no corporation in a Western country or a democratic country should be allowed to get away with aiding that kind of oppression. And if they do, they need to be held accountable.
Nazanin, as you try to build this network of activists to amplify the voices of people in Iran, can you tell us anything about the kinds of connections that you have made with people inside Iran? I know there's a lot of sensitivity regarding that issue. And what has been the impact, to the response to this idea of forming a network?
I think they're urging us to form a network. They're saying, look, the prominent dissident Majid Tawakkoli said to The Guardian in the UK, our hands are tied inside Iran. We can't create these networks. We can't do this kind of operational activity that we can do outside of Iran. So their request and their demand really for the international community is, we don't need you to save us, but please, can you at least get organized and unite and set aside your differences and just work towards a free and democratic Iran? We will do the rest on our side. We're risking our lives, in fact, to do everything on our side, is what they're telling me. But please, can you just organize? And that's really, I think, what is incumbent upon us is to do exactly that. We are millions strong around the world. I think we reportedly have $2.5 trillion between us internationally, the diaspora. Surely, with the brain drain that happened, surely with the intellect that we have in the diaspora, surely with the money we have in the diaspora, we can use not only our voices, but our votes to impact change. And that, I think, is the main message they're saying, is wherever you are as Iranians in the world, use your voices, use your votes to impact change.
Javaid, as you listen to Nazanin describe her work on trying to get a network going, how optimistic are you? You also communicate with civil society, not just with member states of the UN. So what is your view of the prospects of having the Iranian diaspora unite in this kind of network?
Yes, I think the Iranian civil society, Iranian diaspora, they're very committed, and they are committed to generate and to bring about human rights reforms in the country. And I think it is, in fact, the civil society which is propelling the international community to actually listen to their very legitimate concerns. And as you would note from last year in particular, that the international community has responded to the voices that has emerged from the Iranian diaspora. And as Nazanin mentioned, that there is a lot of human rights activism, and there's a lot of passion in what the civil society and the diaspora does. So I would urge the Iranian civil society individuals, the diaspora, to continue their efforts. I would encourage them. I think their efforts have been successful in the sense that they have raised their concerns. They have alerted the international community of the very serious human rights violations taking place in the country. And therefore, I think that if they continue, and I'm sure that they would continue, the results would be equally positive. We have to be persistent. We have to be patient, but persistent, and our endeavors collectively as an international community, we will ensure that there is respect for human rights, and that Iran, and in fact the whole of the region, becomes a beacon for supporting human rights and for promoting human rights.
Well, Nazanin, we only have a few minutes left of our conversation. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience today?
The only thing I want to echo once again, is the Islamic Republic has stayed in power with a policy of divide and rule, divide and oppress. And the antidote to that is unite and empower. Please walk away with that message, that there is strength in our unity, there is strength in our continued voices and our votes. And please don't forget the people of Iran. They are very good. This regime is very good at obfuscating and distracting and diverting. Please don't forget the people of Iran.
And Javaid, in the minute that we have left, I'd like a final thought from you. And also, if you could tell us, you've been in the role for 5 years. What are your future plans? How much longer do you think you're going to be working on these issues?
Yes, thank you. I would say that I'm very thankful, I'm grateful to the Iranian diaspora, to the civil society, to the international community who have supported me in my endeavors to highlight my concerns of the violations of human rights that are taking place in Iran. And as I said, I will be in New York at the General Assembly, so I would welcome interaction from the civil society, or anyone who wants to see me. They're most welcome to come and approach me. As regards my mandate, if you look at the Human Rights Council special procedures, the mandates are limited to 6 years for every independent expert. So, as you know, you mentioned, I started my mandate in July 2018, and next year I would be finishing my personal mandate. That is, that I would have served, I would have had the honor to be the independent expert for 6 years, which I think has served me very well. I'm grateful to the international community, to the United Nations, and to the civil society to have given me that platform to raise my concerns. But I very much hope that the mandate continues to serve its purpose and to serve the Iranian people and the international community once I step down next year.
Well, that wraps up our panel discussion. I'd like to thank very much the UN Special Rapporteur for the situation of human rights in Iran, Javaid Rehman, and actress and activist Nazanin Boniadi, and Nafti, of course, for organizing this panel. Thank you very much. Thank you.